Hi there and welcome. Today I'm excited to bring you the third part of the beginner bag making series that I've developed, and today we're working on the clear vinyl pouch. So we're going to be going over the techniques for working with clear vinyl. So in the first tutorial I showed you how to construct a flat pouch, and let's see, these ones. And then in the second tutorial, we stepped it up a notch and made the three-dimensional pouches. And then today we are going to be working on clear vinyl. So we'll go over all the techniques, and this is a great foundation for future bag making if you're going to integrate clear vinyl into your workflow. So if you've tried to work with clear vinyl before, you probably know that clear vinyl is a completely different beast to sew with than regular cotton or even other things like cork and such. So there are some techniques that I will be showing you on how to make it easier for working with clear vinyl. And also I have some other videos on clear vinyl as far as projects, and also some techniques to use specifically with clear vinyl. We are going to be going through some of those today. However, if you want an in-depth tutorial, I will link it down below. So when you're working with clear vinyl, you'll notice that it is completely different than working with fabric. It takes a new set of skills as well as tools. We'll go over some of those tools. Now, when you're working with vinyl, you'll notice that it is slippery, yet at the same time can be sticky. And what I mean by that, when you go to cut vinyl out with your rotary cutter and ruler, which you will need, you'll notice that you can put a pattern down on your vinyl, or you can trace a pattern and it can be very slippery, and before you know it, it's moved out of line and you haven't cut it to the proper dimensions. Now you can use your masking tape or your painter's tape and keep your larger piece of vinyl and then trace your pattern. The other thing is using a chopping mat. I've already got this template, so I can use that directly on there to cut. Just be careful to cut the vinyl that way. Today I'm just using the template. Now the pattern is a free downloadable pattern. I've actually made some templates because I plan on making several of these pouches. They're so useful. And then I'm going to trace it using a Sharpie. Now this Sharpie is just a regular, it's a pointed tip Sharpie. Some scissors that aren't your fabric scissors. Utility scissors will work for that, as well as just some ordinary snips. You'll need a Teflon foot, which will help glide on the vinyl. So I mentioned earlier that vinyl can either be super slippery when you're actually trying to cut it with a rotary cutter and mat, but it can also be really sticky when it's going through the sewing machine, and it can stick to the bottom of the machine. And so the Teflon foot is basically a plastic non-stick bottom. Now if you don't have a Teflon foot, you can always use a piece of Scotch tape. I only have packing tape, so that's why I have such a big roll. But you can use Scotch tape on the bottom of a regular presser foot and just snip down between the toes to allow for the needle to move, but that will help it glide across the sticky vinyl. Another thing is that because vinyl is not a woven fabric, it is unforgiving, and that means that you can't realign the fibers like you can, say, with a cotton fabric. So with cotton, if you're sewing a seam and you decide that you made a mistake or you want to move the seam or whatnot, you would just rip it out with a seam ripper, and then you can mist it with water and spritz it with a little heat from the iron and realign those fibers with your finger. You can't do that with a non-woven fabric such as the vinyls or the corks or the leathers. So you have to be careful, first of all, and take care. You have to use a longer stitch length with a sewing machine, and what is also helpful is having some sort of cardboard to use when you're clipping the vinyl pieces together so that it doesn't leave an indentation if you find that your clover clips are leaving an indentation. So you'll want your clover clips because you can't use needles like you would with the woven cotton fabric, and you'll also need a hair dryer. The reason why we use a hair dryer is to make the vinyl more pliable. So if you notice, this vinyl is all crinkly. It's been sitting on the shelf, so I'll need to smooth it out in order to cut a pattern out of it. And the easiest way to do that is to use a hair dryer, or you could also run your iron on the ironing board, get the ironing board nice and warm, and then run your clear vinyl over it and smooth it out with your hands, and it'll get rid of the wrinkles in the clear vinyl. Also, when we go to turn the pouch, the hairdryer is useful in making it more malleable, so you are having an easier time in turning. You'll need some tissue paper. I always keep tissue paper under the bed of the sewing machine, that way I can easily find it. But the tissue paper is another trick that we'll use to keep the bag, when we're sewing it, from sticking to the sewing machine bed. The tissue helps it glide right along. You'll need 7-inch zipper, and in this lesson we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. In the first and second, and we actually made zipper tabs. We're going to make zipper tabs, but this time we're going to make them with clear vinyl, just for fun, to try something different. Now, the stitch length I mentioned earlier is a little bit different. When you're working with a non-woven fabric, you want to lengthen the stitches. When non-woven fabric is sewn with a smaller stitch, it can affect the integrity of the seam. So if you're thinking about it, it has more holes or needle punctures throughout the seam, which makes it more susceptible to tearing. So you want to minimize that by using a longer stitch length. And so the stitch length I'll be using today is 3.5 millimeter stitch length. As far as needles are concerned, you can use specialty needles for vinyl or the non-stick chrome needle. And so that's what I'm going to be using, and that just helps minimize the friction and the sticking part of the needle going into the clear vinyl. It's also good to use older blades in this for a project that is vinyl, and then have a different blade for when you're dealing with fabrics. So the other thing you can do is just trace it. It's probably a good idea to have a piece of paper underneath it in case you go off, you don't get the permanent marker on your board. And then just use your scissors. You'll want to do long strokes when you're dealing with clear vinyl. That way you minimize that zigzagging look to your clear vinyl. And then you can always use a little alcohol with a cotton ball to remove the Sharpie if you need to. Then what is different about this versus the cotton pattern is that you'll want to cut 2 clear 1 inch by 1 inch squares. So next, grab a friction pen or a heat erasable marker, fabric marker, and we're going to find the center point of the zipper and mark it on both sides. So you're going to take your tab and then clip it in half. And then look at it to make sure that you're in half. And then clip it. And repeat it for the other end. It's a little easier if you use the table. And then clip it. All right, so I'm all ready to go. I have the Teflon foot on and the vinyl needle on. I'm going to change my stitch length to 3.5. I've got the tissue paper ready, and because we're starting off with such a small piece, you don't need the tissue paper for this. So I'm going to sew this on using, I'm just going to use the width of the presser foot and align it against the left edge of the clear vinyl, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and end. And so another tip is when you're sewing with clear vinyl, you want to be meticulous about trimming your threads, because obviously you can see threads through the clear vinyl, and there's nothing worse than getting your bag assembled and then seeing the threads that you can't trim. Okay, so I'm going to do the other side. So whenever you're doing zipper tabs, just check the other side to make sure that you caught both sides. Next, take your vinyl, fold it in half, matching the edges, and you're going to put in a little tiny notch, just a little one, to mark your center point. And repeat for the other panel as well. No idea where that bit went. Take your zipper and with it right side facing down, take the center point and match it up to the little notch. So you're just wanting to double check that the edges have the same amount hanging off. You're going to clip it. Actually, I'm going to put the flat side on this side, on the wrong side. So it'll lay flat on the bed of the machine. It's time to take it to the sewing machine and sew straight across, about 1/4 inch in from the edge, back stitching at both ends. This is where you want to use your tissue paper. Lay your panel on it as much as possible. You can also lift it up a little bit to help. Now I'm going to move the zipper head, and if you get the tissue paper caught, don't worry about it, you can just tear it off. Back stitch on that zipper tab. I'm just flipping the zipper up and kind of working with my hands to smooth out the vinyl back down in preparation for top stitching. I'm going to top stitch pretty close because I want to be able to catch this part. So I'm going to line up the inside of the toe on the right side with the folded edge and go slowly so that you can kind of adjust as needed. Back stitch. And then you can pull the zipper head out of the way, still maintaining the fold aligned with the inside of the right foot. Okay, now I'm going to move the zipper head. And if it shifts, try to pull it down. So you can see that now it lays flat. With the zipper right sides facing up, you're going to take the other panel, align the notch with a center point. And the biggest thing here is making sure that your sides are aligned with the bottom piece. And it can get quite sticky. So I'm just making sure that the edges are lined up. Okay, back to the sewing machine, across 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to go ahead and move the zipper head out of the way, relining everything back up at 1/4 inch. And see how it pooches out? You want to make sure that you're lining that back. Feel that it's getting stuck, and go ahead and lift it up a little bit and try to put maybe less pressure on it. See it kind of move a little bit. There we go. See, I caught some of that tissue paper. Okay, so we're going to repeat, pulling it away from the zipper and getting it ready to top stitch. So at this point, I'm aligning the left side of the toe, the inside, with a fold. See how it wants to stick, so see how we do it. You want to make sure that the zipper tape is uncurled too. So I'll go ahead and move this out of the way. And again, if you need to lift it up, you can. I'm going to open up the zipper, notch out the corners by using the 1 inch by 1 inch little template. Just needs to be enough to see it. And repeat for the other 3 corners. Now I know I cut 4 corners, but I don't know where the other little squares went. Not seeing them. Anyway, okay, so you've got the zipper right side out. We're just going to fold it and clip it. So we're just clipping the top folded edges and lining them up and clipping it. And if you happen to have an edge that's not that's kind of jaggedy, you can always cut it again or trim it. And because this is not lined, and we keep this zipper open, you don't have to leave a turning gap or an unsewn part in the lining. Do the best you can to line it up. If needed, we can trim it. So I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew all the way around, back stitching at the beginning of and the end, 3/8 of an inch. So basically you're coming to the end of the zipper tape and going down, sewing that side, leave this part unsewn and coming across all the way, leave this part unsewn and coming up that way. And because this can be thicker, you can always use a piece of wadded up fabric or a hump jumper if you have one of those. If you're new to sewing, you probably don't, so you can just take any kind of piece of thick fabric and wad it up and put it behind your foot. And this kind of gets tricky because you've got a lot of layers on this side, plus you're dealing with sticky. So. Now sometimes what I like to do is do a double row of stitching just to get it good and secure so it doesn't come undone, especially if I'm using it for like travel products. I'm going to reach in and it's time to box the corners. Okay, so now you're just wanting to get a straight line and you're trying to line up the sewing stitches, and you want the seam allowance to go in the same direction. I like starting in further and then back stitching. Can go again, lining it up to the left side of the toe. Again, you want the seam allowance going in the same direction. And I'm lining up the stitching lines. All that's left to do is hit it with the hairdryer, and we're going to turn it right side out. There's your finished little pouch. You can use for toiletries or whatever you want. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful in learning some of the clear vinyl techniques. And I'm going to just go spray that with a little water and see if I can get it out. And it came right off.